Hello, brothers and sisters. The title of the message today is Sufficiency under God's Grace. Number 5, God gave us spouse number 1. Before He existed, God was existing, and before we owned anything, God gave us everything. God gave us the light, breath of life, man, and the garden. The people think as if they could make everything and create everything as soon as they were born. But before we were born, God prepared all our needs. When Adam opened up his eyes, there was everything already. When we came out to the world, there was everything. If we have life, we have everything. When we begin to breathe and open up our eyes, there was everything. This is man's life. In Genesis, as God said, let there be light, and there was light. As God said, let the dry land revealed, the dry land really revealed. Let the plants grow up, the plants grew up, yes. Everything was already existed. Could people watch things that God created those creatures? Is there anyone who could watch when God created those creatures? No, nobody. Therefore, the writer of Genesis wrote those things that already existed. The light, sky, land, plants, sun, moon, stars, fish, birds, beasts, on the ground, and the people were already there. As everything was already prepared, we don't need to look for something that are not existing, but if we look for something that are already existing, it's so easy. So many people are looking for God. The people are looking for God where there is no God. That's why it's so difficult. But God is existing before we are created. If you think like this, everything will become easy. God existed before people's existence. Everything was existing before we were born. There's nothing we can create. Everything was existing before. There was nothing new. If then, for whom all these things were created. Everything was created for people, us. It is man's happiness when we realize nothing is lacking in our life. Suppose God just gave us the breath of life and gave us nothing else, where could we live? That's why He gave us the garden. Even though God gave Adam the garden, as it is not good for Adam staying alone, so God gave Adam's spouse with whom Adam could dwell together. This is for the final fulfillment. God gave me everything and also the spouse for the final fulfillment. God said for man to stay alone is not good. God felt so sorry about Adam staying alone. Therefore, He said, I'll create his spouse. The helper, the staying alone has no meaning, no purpose, no glory, and no production or reproduction. God did not think this is good. People are supposed to live in union, not staying alone. People must be united together and achieve something. If people stay alone, and nothing can be possible. That's why God was seeking for a spouse. But people try to seek for a spouse themselves. People seek for something that is helpful for their own life and seek for their spouse. But before that, God is looking for our spouse. God led all the creatures to Adam and told him to look for his spouse. Adam gave names to all creatures. Adam gave names to all creatures means that he gave them meaning for their existence. Adam gave names as cows, as dogs, and it meant that as a man, he gave them meaning for their existence. But he couldn't find any creature that could be called as his own spouse. As God led all the creatures, Adam gave names to them, and those names became their real names. But among them, there was no creature that could be called his own spouse. For just animals that can breathe and have food cannot become his spouse. Needless to say, other substance could not become his spouse either. Those creatures with life and just animals couldn't become man's spouse. Some people would try to take some substance as spouse. They try to take visible or invisible substance as their spouse. They want to live in those things, with those things and through those things. Those business people through their business, those scholars with their studies, those artists want to take art as their spouse. They want to be united together as one lump and want to lead their life. But their business cannot become themselves. Even though their business may be so nice, business cannot become themselves. Even though the art may be wonderful, art cannot become one with themselves. Even the breathing and living creatures cannot become our spouse. Moreover, those creatures without life, the dead things, how can they become our spouse? During the Old Testament time, people of Israel worshiped the idols many times. Why did they worship hard, hand-carved idols? Can stone talk? Could those carved idols think? No. They cannot become spouse. They cannot become one with people. Needless to say, those things that have no life cannot become spouse of people. No. But then people look for a spouse seeking money, knowledge, honor all through their life, but they end up in failure vainly. God knew they're worthless. He pushed them aside. God did not lead business to Adam and check whether it can become his spouse. Nor God did not lead knowledge to Adam, check whether it can become his spouse. But foolish people are still checking. But at least God leads a living being as to Adam and let him check whether there is his spouse or not. In Genesis chapter 2, verse 19 through 20, now the Lord God had formed out of the ground all beasts of the field and all the birds of the air. He brought them to a man to see what he would name them. And whatever the man called each living creature, that was its name. So the man gave names to all the livestock, the birds of the air, and all the beasts of the field. All the creatures are defined by people. If people would say, we define fortunes as our estate or play toys, they are our treasures and so on, according to the concept of the people, they become different. But the reality became opposite. Creatures define people's names and position. If you cannot be called as a president of the company, a scholar of a famous people, or your name will be disappeared. If other people ask, who are you? I have to answer, I'm a president of a company, or I'm a scholar, or I'm a famous person. Only then I can behave in the society. Eventually, people are defined by the creature. As we cannot see the existence of the person, we look at people with their outward possession. Mr. Byung-Chul Lee, late chairman of Samsung Business Corporation, is defined by Samsung. Thus, if Samsung Corporation go under bankruptcy, he loses his name. But as Samsung Corporation is so prosperous, he is remembered as the greatest businessman in Korea during 5,000 years of history. Those businessmen, they love their business. They sacrifice their life for that business because only when their business becomes prosperous, their names will go upward. how miserable they are. People must define those business, but they define people. If their position is gone, if they lose all the money, the meaning of their life is gone. They become people like as if they lost their whole soul. Man's spouse is not among creatures. Adam gave names to the creatures, but there is no spouse. People define all the creatures, but there is no creatures that could be defined as their spouse. If we are recovered into Eden and into God, creatures will be defined by us. People are supposed to define all the creatures. If we have fellowship in the church, we meet people through existence. This is the difference between church and the world. We don't define with any kinds of worldly criteria. Only existence comes and goes. And other definition cannot be included in our fellowship. The moment we contact certain people in the world, the worldly definition comes into us. When we meet a president of the company that comes to us, I don't contact the person, but actually I contact the company. Suppose his company go under bankruptcy, we contact that person with something else. The moment his company go bankrupt, he becomes an entirely different person right away. I know a person who ran a textile business. His company went bankrupt. His house was taken by the bank. The president of the company had to pay his debt with that money, selling his house. He said, the bank tellers bowed down when I had a lot of money in my account. But suddenly they became so cold-hearted. He felt the misery of life. Actually, he himself was a miserable person from the beginning, but he just simply thought he became miserable as he didn't have any money. Yesterday, bank workers welcomed him with big smiles, the president, sir, but today they treated him so cold. Oh, they were seeking, you have to pay back the loan you got from our bank. The world is such a cold place. So the man with much money and the man with no money are entirely different. But when we are in the church, everything is different. With money or without money, it doesn't matter. Our relationship never changes. Yesterday or today, it is the same day eternally. Whether people become bankrupt or become prosperous, people are the same. Suppose one brother got a lottery and got millions of dollars overnight and became a rich man, or invested in the stock market and his whole money is all gone. He's the same person. We meet brothers and sisters through existence, not through money. This is a great blessing. We have nothing special, but our relationship is quite different from the person who used to be rich but became miserable as his business went bankrupt. The people of the world trust and wait for those things will define themselves, but when those things are demolished, their heaven will be demolished, their whole life will be demolished. One man's position was the principal of a school, but from the day when he was retired, he had no hope and he died slowly. Whether they are principal or retired men, they're the same people actually, but their life seems to be ended. It was because they took the wrong thing as their spouse. They could not meet the rightful spouse, but the wrong spouse, because they took the fruit of good and evil. Our ancestor Adam was so smart that God led all the creatures and said there was no spouse. Adam is a representative of all men. He was the smartest person. He took the fruit of good and evil and something went wrong, but he was still very smart. Nobody is as smart like him. President of the Republic, chairman, president of the company, all are defined by other creatures, But Adam defined all the living creatures, like cows, dogs, and so on. He knew there was no spouse among other creatures. Therefore, God let Adam fall into deep sleep and took one of his ribs and filled it with flesh and created a woman. God made Adam fall into deep sleep. Suppose God took a man's rib with anesthesia, it would be so painful, hard to endure. But God made him fall into deep sleep and took one of his ribs. What a graceful world. We don't know exactly how God took one of his ribs, but he fell into deep sleep and God took it. Some smart people worry about, God may take one of my ribs and it'll be so painful. They worry about their death too early, and if I follow Jesus, I may die earlier. Why did I decide to follow Jesus? But God never takes the rib of the people before they fall into deep sleep. Those people who went under operation, they really didn't feel anything. These days, the technology of anesthesia was so much developed, they feel as if they fell into the deep sleep. Suppose doctors operate without anesthesia, how painful it would be. Ouch. People are so careful, but moreover, God will do the job so smoothly with more attentiveness. We don't need to worry about it. We don't need to worry about it in advance. Peter and other disciples were crucified with Christ without realizing it. Jesus was crucified, but disciples were not crucified. But they were included in Jesus. That's how they were crucified. All the disciples went to the Sea of Galilee. They thought they ran away, but later they found out the fact that they were crucified in Christ already. St. Paul had never seen Jesus who was crucified. But he said, I have been crucified with Christ, and I no longer live, but Christ lives in me. The life I live in the body, I live by faith in the Son of God who loved me and gave himself for me. Galatians chapter 2, verse 20. Now, if we died with Christ, we believe that we'll also live with him. Romans 6, verse 8. That because God took his rib, that when he fell into deep sleep, Jesus went to Golgotha as our representative. He went there alone. Peter followed Jesus, but as he was disappointed, he ran away. So many people shouted out loud, he must be killed. He must be killed because he committed blasphemy. Disciples were disappointed and they all ran away. Jesus went to Golgotha alone, but right there all men died. Those big crowds who shouted out loud and disciples who were disappointed and ran away, but they all died right there. The position was the place where all Adam died. All the good people died and all the evil people died there. Jesus died alone individually, but actually all mankind died. Through one man, Jesus, all mankind in Adam died. Everybody was finished up there. Jewish people who believed in God in a most enthusiastic way and monopolized God killed God's Son. Well, monopolize God, that kind of self-righteousness was finished up right there. Without this self-righteousness, Jewish people have no reason to live. Without Jehovah God, they are dead people. Because of Jehovah God, they have the reason to live. But that kind of people killed God's Son. Their life was finished right there. All of their pride and glory was finished up. Jewish people have no reason to exist any longer. All of Jewish people were finished. Jewish people who had to preserve Jehovah God were all finished up. But spiritually, if they really knew the fact that they were all dead, they could have become truly happy. but they did still think they are living. We are Jewish people. Apart from Jewish people, nobody can grab God. Apart from Jewish people, nobody can preserve Jehovah God. Apart from Jewish people, nobody can preserve the truth. They insisted. But when they killed Jesus, everything about Jewish people and Jewish people themselves were finished up. Even the most excellent pitcher in the baseball, if his arms are broken, his life as a pitcher died. If he cannot throw balls anymore, his life as a pitcher is finished up. If Jewish people cannot preserve the name of Jehovah God, it's the end of themselves. They have no reason to live, and the value of their existence is finished up. When they killed Jesus, everything was finished up. In spite of the fact they still think we're Jewish people, they're still wandering around in the dark place. Disciples did not have anything else without Jesus. They were fishermen, but as they left their ship and fish net behind, they really didn't own anything. They wished Jesus would make a success. Jesus had to become a king. Only then they had reason to live. But as Jesus was killed, they became like dead people. When they returned to the Sea of Galilee, they were perfectly dead people. What could they say anything? They declared they were following Messiah, but as they left behind Messiah, what could they say? Nothing. They had nothing to say. They were dead people. Jewish people and Gentiles all deserted Jesus. They also deserted their own life. They killed a true man and deserted that very man. They all died. But one day Jesus rose from the dead. They met the one who rose from the dead. Jewish people met Jesus on the position of death. Disciples met Jesus on the position of death. They died as Jewish people and they died as disciples, but suddenly, one day they met a new man in the world of resurrection. Nobody knew they themselves were dead. People said, we must kill Jesus. And disciples became so disappointed they ran away. Jewish people shouted, that kind of man must be killed. And disciples thought, we follow the vainful person. Why did he follow that kind of man? And left him. Everyone was finished. They did not know they themselves were also killed. This is the fact. They fell into deep sleep. As Adam fell into deep sleep, a new life came out. Spouse came out when he fell into deep sleep. Because of the reason why they were Jewish people, because of the reason why they were disciples, they fell into deep sleep. They fell into deep sleep because of the reason why they killed Jesus and because of the reason why they loved Jesus. For any reasons, mankind all fell into deep sleep. Even the people who followed Jesus, there was nobody who was still alive before the crucified Jesus. Some ladies were crying below the cross. They were not living either. They were crying plaintively, but they were not living. They were dead people. They did not betray Jesus, but they were not living. In fact, when Jesus died on the cross, nobody had any hope. Nobody had any righteousness. Nobody was living. Jewish people, when they killed Jesus, they said they will put you out of the synagogue. In fact, a time is coming when anyone who kills you will think he's offering a service to God. What a great righteousness it was. But the righteousness was a dead righteousness. There was no righteousness of man. There was no love. There was no goodness. There was nothing. Therefore, as one man died, all mankind were finished up. Nobody could become proud. Those proud people became unrighteous people. Those disciples were disappointed. They used to be proud of themselves, but their life was finished up. In front of Jesus, everyone's life was finished up. This is falling into a deep sleep. When people meet Jesus, this kind of phenomena always takes place. When people meet Buddha or Confucius, this kind of phenomena never takes place. When we meet Jesus, we'll confess, as I meet him, my life is finished up. Those people who have righteousness, their righteousness will be finished up. Those people who have love, their love will be finished up. Those people who have passion, that passion will be finished up. Everything that we own will be finished up. This is the death. This is the death as where we fall into deep sleep. Right here, the spouse come out. Church came out when Jesus fell into deep sleep. As he fell into deep sleep, God created woman with his rib. Ephesians chapter 5, verse 25, husbands, love your wives. But just as Christ loved the church and gave himself for her, in the whole universe, only one man who God acknowledged can stay alive. All other people died. We acknowledge all finished up. New man who God acknowledged can live. Only Jesus can live. Yes. When Adam fell into deep sleep, God took one of his ribs. When we fell asleep, we don't do anything. Where we cannot do anything, where we don't do anything, the spouse come out. When Jesus went down to the tomb, spouse came out. When he fall into deep sleep, spouse comes out. In the church, when he fall into deep sleep, spouse come out. If we don't fall into deep sleep, spouse doesn't come out. We don't know the reason why, but if we fall into deep sleep, spouse comes out always. Whether I fall into deep sleep with my righteousness or my love, if I fall into deep sleep, a spouse comes out. If we fall into deep sleep and wake up, we fall in love with everybody. The distance will become closer and closer. All the walls and obstacles will be demolished. Everything will become possible after we fall into deep sleep. Jesus came in early morning the next day of the Sabbath. As we fall into deep sleep and deeper sleep, we can be united deeper. If we die deeper, we'll live deeper. Jesus went down to preach to the spirits in prison. If we meet the Lord and fall into deep sleep, God will prepare our spouse and come to us. We don't know exactly, but God created beloved ones with a rib, and she comes to us. Those people are our spouse with whom we'll become one body. And what a mysterious thing it is. Yes. Thank you. Hallelujah. May God bless every one of you. Thank you again. Thank you.